Hi everyone, welcome to this Meal Planning 101 workshop, part of the Growing Gardeners workshop series. So if you've not taken a Growing Gardeners workshop before, let me explain a little bit about the program. This event is part of that. It is a collaboration between City Sprouts and the Big Garden, both within Omaha, Nebraska. We teach about 50 to 70 classes per year between us and different other partners that we bring in. And we try to offer 4 seasons, year-round, hands-on workshops, generally when it's not a pandemic out. And we try to feature skills and techniques that will work for everyone interested in gardening at home, growing their own food, preserving, and just more healthy and sustainable living. Also, if you want to look at other workshops and resources, just go to www.growinggardeners.org and you can find all of our workshops. You can subscribe to our newsletter and be the first to receive a notification that we have new workshops available, and you can register for classes on there. So I'm your instructor for this class. I'm ADDIE GENGENBACH. I'm the current communications manager at City Sprouts. I've been there for almost a year now, and I'm teaching this class because I'm a former line cook and a food purchaser for a hotel. I've done that before, and I just love organization and food in general, so I was really excited to teach this class and hopefully share a few tips and tricks that you haven't heard of when it comes to planning and organizing. I also wanted to teach this class because I really want to encourage people to go to the grocery store a little less often than they normally do. If you go to the grocery store multiple times a week, maybe try extending that a week. If you go once a week, try to extend that 2 or 3 weeks. I think right now, the more social distancing we can do, the healthier our community will be down the line. So with that, let's get going. So why meal plan in the first place? I feel like it saves a ton of time. Yes, it is a decent amount of upfront planning, and it can take a little while to get into the swing of that. But you don't have to think every day what you're cooking. You don't have to look at your ingredients and be like, what am I gonna make out of all of this? You've done all that planning before, so it's a lot easier. You save money, you know what you're gonna buy, you buy it consistently, you just buy that. It's less stress. Like I said, you don't have to think about what you're making on a day-to-day basis. It cuts down, I feel like it cuts down significantly on food waste. With everything planned, you are only buying what you need and you're using all of that up before it goes bad. I generally will use like every piece of fresh produce in my fridge before I go buy anything else. So it gets pretty empty. It's a lot cleaner overall. I don't usually forget about too much in the back. So. And then you're not impulse buying. And with that, hopefully you're a little healthier. You're not relying as much on processed foods and random snacks that you buy when you're hungry or you don't really have a direction when you're shopping at the grocery store. And then ideally, much fewer grocery trips. I personally plan out to 2 to 3 weeks between my grocery trips, and I feel like it saves me a lot of time and stress. I'm not the biggest fan of going grocery shopping. I kind of make it a mission every time I do. So it can save you a ton on that, ton of stress around grocery shopping. All right. Step 1 is your inventory. You're gonna want to take an inventory of everything in your kitchen, ideally. You want to either just grab a notebook and start with that and keep everything in that same spot. Or if you prefer using digital media to track and keep everything in that place, then I like to use Evernote a lot. It's just kind of a digital notebook. It's free to use. Some people like using Google Docs or a Word doc, anything like that would definitely work. I feel like you should commit to just having one of those, just like keep everything in one place. It will help you down the road. And then all you have to do is create major categories that your family eats. Most categories are going to be roughly the same, pretty relatively straightforward, but depending on if you eat a special diet that's outside of the norm, if you're like vegan or vegetarian or pescatarian or whatever, your categories are going to look slightly different. And then just list whatever foods you currently have within each of those categories. So go through your fridge, your freezer, your pantry, anywhere else you might keep additional food, and list all of that out. If you would like, there's these awesome free printable meal planners and calendars, which I have down here. If you look at the slides later on, it's also in the resources area, so check that out. They're really beautiful. Someone put a lot of time and energy into making them, and I think they're really helpful. So inventory categories is very straightforward, basic. Just your pantry, you'll have grains and legumes like pastas, dried beans, oatmeals, etc. Canned and jarred, cartoned things like soups and tomato, tuna, salsa, peanut butter. I like to keep my baking and cooking supplies in one area and one category. So flour, sugar, spices, oils and vinegars that you use while cooking. And then any sort of snacks, processed food, popcorn, crackers, nuts, anything that you would just grab from the cupboard and eat as is. So fridge and freezer, dairy, milk, cheese, yogurt. You got your protein, which could look different depending on your diet. Produce, anything you have on the counter or in the fridge and freezer. I talk about storing all this later. And then condiments, any sort of salad dressing, ketchup, hot sauce, etc. And then the UNL has an awesome basic food checklist with a little bit more details and examples. So I encourage you to check that out if you're trying to come up with categories for when you inventory stuff. I also really encourage people to keep track throughout the week. As you run out of staple food items that aren't necessarily part of your meal planning, or just like a fraction of it will be, like a spice or salt or flour, basic staple items like that. Just keep it in a convenient spot, whether you have your phone on you on a consistent basis and you can keep it in your phone notes, or if you would like to keep it on your fridge. That's where I keep mine, and we just have a little dry erase board that we add to throughout the week so we don't forget. And then the benefit of this is that you rarely have to inventory your staple food items if you keep track of it as you run out of things or get close to running out. It will save you time on that inventory spot. And then, for example, staple food items are spices, baking supplies, grains, etc. You get it. So tips when it comes to inventorying. Do not worry about everything. You don't have to necessarily do your condiments, spices, and flours. I feel like it's helpful for your very first time to list those things, just so you know what you have, what you need to use up. Maybe throwing spices that you've had for 7 years or something out if they've lost their potency. But yeah, I think that's good to do every 6 months or something, just to keep up with it, but it's optional. You definitely do not have to do that for meal planning. The more important thing is to list your like fresh food items or some of your bulk goods, like larger components of most meals. Take some time to organize your kitchen and wherever else you store food. I think, like I said, it helps a lot. You can find things much quicker. You can keep all the same things in the same place so you know what you have, so you don't have like beans in 3 different parts of your house. and then you don't end up having to rebuy thing or like buying a double of everything when you had it at home, so you didn't eat it for a meal. Saves you money. Clean out your fridge and freezer before you meal plan. You don't have to deep clean it or anything. I find just going through it really quick, usually, like I said, my fridge and freezer are pretty empty by the time I go grocery shopping, pretty cleared out, so it's easy just to go in there with a rag, wipe any potential spills down that happened over the last few weeks, and see what I have in there if I've forgotten about anything. I know I am a chronic store of condiments and pickles and fermented food, so I always need to find up ways to use that up, so it's just a good reminder of what you have. So meal planning is next. There are a few questions that I suggest you ask yourself before you start up your meal planning process. The first is, what is your budget? Meal planning will really help you stick more to a budget. You can I know people can spend $20 to $50 a person per week on food if they're really watching it, and you can spend hundreds, thousands if you really wanted on food per person throughout the month. So what is your budget? What do you want to keep track of? Eating a ton of protein, which is pretty common within the Midwest and Nebraska, we're kind of meat capital, is available, but if your budget is smaller, you might want to lower how much protein you're eating to what's necessary, which is about 4 ounces a day. And that will greatly affect your budget. So you might want to include more vegetarian meals or whatever in there. Does your family have any dietary restrictions or health goals? Does anyone in your family, are they allergic to peanuts or gluten or anything like that? Or are you trying to get more vegetables in your family's diet overall? Just keep that in mind. Kind of keep your goals off to the side and thinking about them in the back of your head when you're coming up with the meals you want to cook. And then, will your family eat leftovers? I know some families aren't the biggest fan of leftovers, so they end up wasting a lot more food than intended. This really helps you, whether your family is leftover eaters or not, it really helps you determine how many servings you need to cook for each meal. If you love having a leftover day and you don't have to worry about cooking on that day, then you can cook extra food depending on how big your family is, and eat that for several days, or freeze it and eat it a week or two later. So important to think about. And then, what are your family's favorite meals? What do you guys eat on a regular basis that everyone generally loves and is a hit? Start thinking about that. And then, how many meals do you need? So I have this example of, say, this is a 4-person household. Everybody eats breakfast 7 days a week, so that's 28 servings. Say a mom and a child is staying home, and another child is going to school, and her partner is going to work, then maybe you only have 2 people eating lunch, and that's 18 servings a week. And then dinner, 4 people, 7 days a week, that's 28 servings. Or if you go out, you can, or depending on how much you eat out or order out, you can decrease the amount of servings that you might need for any given meal there. So the first thing I would suggest is doing a go-to favorites list for your family. Just start listing 5 to 10 meals. It can be a really basic list of pizza, spaghetti, tacos, whatever you guys really like. And then it can be added to and become more complex over time as you get more comfortable with meal planning and trying out different recipes and whatnot. It will save you a ton of time. If you had about, say, 8 go-to favorite meals that you did every single month. That's only like 2 meals. That's 2 meals that you don't have to think about very much every week. So it can save you a lot of time. You generally know what you need, and it's easy to look at and plug into your meal plan. And then if you try a new meal that's a hit with your family, add it to the list. If they absolutely love it, then you can grow that list over time. And then if your family really likes a routine, consider having a themed or consistent dinner 1 to 2 days a week. Some examples are Taco Tuesdays, Meatless Mondays, Pizza Fridays, etc. And it doesn't have to be the same old tacos or the same type of pizza. You could mix it up and try like a meatless pizza or a white pizza or a taco pizza or whatever. Like, it can just be the type of food item, and week to week it can change in how that looks. Alright, so next up is we're gonna find some food inspiration to do our meal planning with. The first is Food Gawker. I'm a little bit obsessed with Food Gawker. I think I've used it for the past 6 years at least. I don't know, it's been a while. And I will do a little video on it here. Alright, so we're gonna go to Food Gawker, and I'll show you guys around a bit and why I love this site so much. So this is the website. It just pulls a bunch of different food blogs all together in one website. It's very visual. It's super easy to navigate around, and you can create a profile where you can then, I'm not signed in right now, but you can heart these things and it will save it to look at later. So the search feature is pretty simple, and you can include different categories. If you're looking at soups and stews specifically, you just click on that and search. And my internet's slow. So these are the soups and stews, 57,000 results if you would like to look through all of them, of that specific category. So yeah, if you go to any one of these, everyone is like a different blog specifically that you go to. So you can look at that blogger's information and generally find the recipe in each thing. If you have a specific ingredient, say you have a ton of squash right now and you want to do a soup or a pasta noodle, you can specifically search that ingredient or keyword in there, and it will come up with different things within that category that you can use. So that is a great way to start with an ingredient or a type of category and find inspiration for what you want to include in your meals. All right, now that we're back, other food inspiration sources that I like are Pinterest. My sister loves using Pinterest. She usually finds all of her recipes on there. If you haven't used it, it's a great site. It pulls in links from all over the internet, similar to Food Gawker, and you can save them, put them in different boards and categories. For example, you could do different seasonal boards, like fall recipes versus summer recipes, etc. Cookbooks are really great too. I personally have a ton of cookbooks that I would love to spend more time with, but forget about sometimes because I'm so attached to my computer. But it is really great. Maybe I'm a nerd, but my idea of a fun Friday night is like having a glass of wine, looking through some cookbooks, and finding some great inspiration for upcoming meals. And you don't have to use that exact same recipe. It's really great just to look at the pictures. Maybe you see a risotto and there's a lot of mushrooms on sale or available right now and you want to make a mushroom risotto at that time. It's great for that. And then, like we mentioned, your favorite meals list is a great resource guide, especially as you start building it up. And during the week when you're just kind of spent and you don't want to think up of new creative recipes to try, it's a really solid go-to list for that. And then previous meal plans, like I said, if you keep everything in one place, you organize it, it's easy to search and find. You can go back year after year. I've been doing this for over 4 years now, this whole meal planning process on a decently consistent basis. So if I want, I can go back to April meals from 2016 or 2017 and see what I was eating or craving at that time. I usually can remember those specific meals and if I like them or not. It's also good to put notes in your meal plans if you remember too. But yeah, it's usually a really good indicator of like what you're feeling during that season. And then weekly grocery store flyers, I think it's a great option to start with either local foods or your grocery store, what's on sale, what's available, or what ingredient you have at home that you want to use up. Just starting with that ingredient you can really build meals off of that. Especially with the different resources I have mentioned and will mention at the end too. You can search by ingredient and find meals super easy associated with that. And then your local food sources. Lone Tree Foods is a great one. I suggest that if you want to do produce with them, most of their produce seems like it's in bulk. So maybe go in with friends and family on that, or if you have a very large family, it might be perfect for you. I feel like they are a great source for local meat and protein options. They usually have, family size instead of like restaurant commercial size food available, and they have several pickup spots around Omaha that you can order online, pick up at your time. Good to go. Less people that you're interacting with, so more social distancing, which is a plus. Farmers markets, depending if they are going on as much this summer, they are a good option. It's nice to just walk around, see what's in season, see what farmers have available at that time, and to start with that whole concept. A few hero ingredients that you really want to highlight in your dishes and build meals based on what's available. Extending into that is CSAs, which stands for Community Supported Agriculture. CSAs are offered by local farms and you pay an upfront cost, but you can do a lot of them offer seasonal, like early spring, summer, fall, but some of them offer the whole year for a set price, and you pick up a bag of produce from them generally every week. I did mine through Big Muddy last year, Big Muddy Urban Farm, and it was super great, really convenient to pick up every week. It kept me on my toes with figuring out different meal plans, and it was kind of fun. And I'm a person that feels like I've tried I try new foods at every chance I get, anytime I see or have anything available. And they were able to introduce me to a few new foods that I had never tried, like service berries and cucamelons, which are super adorable. So yeah, I totally suggest supporting the local farmers through CSAs. It's a great model. It's really fun. Good to get your produce from them. And then your garden, if you are watching this video, there's a good chance that you also like gardening because of all of our workshops, and that's what our organizations do. So if you have certain foods that are just going crazy in your garden and you need to use them up it's great to factor them into your meal plans and use those ingredients as the heroes and just put everything else around that. Next up, you're gonna actually want to write your meal plan. We're finally to that part. So you wanna think about how many meals you're going to make before your next grocery trip. In this example, I have about 3 meals per week. As an example, I personally do 3 to 4 meals, or like separate things I'm cooking on a weekly basis, and then I'll eat leftovers in between there and maybe go out once a week or so. So whatever your family is looking for, whatever works for you, just figure out how many weeks you're planning for and how many separate meals you need to cook during that time. And then think about how you can use up ingredients you already have. During that whole inventory process, if you have anything expiring soon, anything you need to use up, anything you want to use up particularly, now's your time to add that into your meal plan and start building from there. And then what is your week gonna look like? Factor in how busy you're gonna be, how much energy you have. Do you have people coming over or staying with you, visiting over the summer? Depending on how much you have going on throughout your week, you may want to do easier meal plans that are going to take 20-30 minutes to put together versus like fancier meals that might take you hours before you're finished and have everything on the table. So just factor that in. Sometimes I like to do a good mix and pick things depending on my mood or energy for that night. So tips for meal planning specifically. It is helpful to include a list of new meals you want to try. When you're going through your cookbooks or online inspiration, anytime you see anything that sounds really interesting or like it tastes really good or uses some new techniques that you want to try, add that to another list that you can come back to later if it doesn't seem to fit into your meal plan, or you just are like me and you have like 20 meals on there and you need to narrow it down to 9. It's good for that. It also will save time later down the road when you're not feeling as creative or like exploring new things as much. The freezer is your friend. I love cooking meals, especially things that freeze really well, like soups and stews. Some rice dishes are all right. And I just put them in containers. I'll make a ton, have leftovers, put them in containers, put them in the freezer. And generally the third week of the month, I barely have to cook. It's all pretty much, I just take a thing out of the freezer a couple days before I plan on eating it, let it thaw in the fridge, and I'm good to go. I don't have to think about things. And depending on how fast you use all that stuff up, you can kind of almost create your own little backlog inventory of that for days or weeks that you're just not feeling like putting the energy into cooking. And like I said, save your previous meal plans. If you keep them all in one area, it's really easy to reference back later on. It's great to look back at those at a similar time of year and just like remix them, and saves you a ton of time overall when you're planning your meals. Sometimes you can just like copy and paste them and that's your meal plan for the week, and you just figure out what new ingredients you need. And then don't worry about assigning meals to specific days of the week. You don't have to have sloppy joes on Monday, pizza on Tuesday, etc. Like, unless you're doing the aforementioned like themed meal days of the week, just do whatever you're craving, whatever you're feeling, whatever you have energy and time for. Don't make it overly complicated by having to do things on specific days. And then you really want to prioritize your first week that you cook. If you're buying groceries for multiple weeks, use all the fresh ingredients you can or preserve them in some way. during that first week, so you don't have any food waste. You don't have to go back to the grocery store to pick something that you didn't use up fast enough. And again, freezer vegetables specifically, I love getting frozen broccoli, corn, cauliflower, peas, and having those on hand for the second and third weeks. So things still taste fresh and good, but they're not going to go bad in my fridge. And there's the example. Lettuce only lasts a few days. Potatoes can last weeks, sometimes months if you store them right. And frozen broccoli and other vegetables last even longer. So just get an idea of how long everything can last and when you're using it up. Okay, next up is the actual shopping for your meals. And before doing that, you gotta write your grocery list. So I find it easiest to break my grocery list up into sections. I did this quick example on the right in this picture of the week 1 and week 2 example meals, and then the produce, dry goods, protein, dairy associated with what I would need for each of those food items. If you do this, you want to think about how your grocery store is laid out, what door you usually approach on, what's closest. I feel like produce sections are generally the closest, or the first thing you see in most grocery store layouts. So I always put my produce first, then I usually get dairy, dry goods, proteins after that, and maybe some random health goods after those. So if you think about how you approach the grocery store, and you can actually get all of your groceries that you need in that particular section at that time, you don't have to backtrack a lot. You're less likely to forget things if you group them into each thing instead of having like romaine, cheddar cheese, walnuts, peas, etc. Like it will all be in that section. And yeah, know what route you usually walk. And then, yeah, it saves you a lot of time. You rarely have to backtrack and go hunt another item down that you missed the first time around. And don't forget to include that staples list that I mentioned, that you're keeping on your phone or your fridge or wherever is convenient for you. So I generally just list things I need for those specific meals that I've planned out, but then I have a separate list that I add into that final grocery list of the staples, toiletries, anything for my medicine cabinet and whatnot. I add that to the full list later on. Grocery shopping tips. I think we've all grocery shopped several times before, but just these are some few things that help me. Stick to the list and trust the list. So you've created this beautiful list, this awesome meal plan. You've really thought it out. You've done your inventory to see what you have and what you need. Just really trust yourself there. It will save health and energy and money and stuff if you just get the things on the list. I and my husband, we do shop together, and we generally allow like a snack item just to keep us entertained, that we'll pick up at the store. But beyond that, we only get things that are on our list. And with that in mind, figure out how you best shop. If you have kids, and it's kids are always a little bit more difficult to shop with in the grocery store, a little bit more impulsive. So try to have your partner or a babysitter or whatever take care of kids while you go out and grocery shop. You may have a partner or a friend or a roommate that may make a little bit more impulsive decisions. So as well, so you might want to leave them home depending on your guys' dynamic. People don't always know all the effort you put into that, making that meal plan, or understand the vision. So whatever works for you. But I have my husband come with me. He's a really good cart pusher, and I can run and grab things and throw it in the cart and go to the next section. So during less busy times of day. I do this generally, even when we're not having a pandemic, but it's especially important right now at this time to socially distance and keep everyone and yourself healthy. And then on that note, keep it clean. Don't, like, most grocery stores have wipes at the front of the store to wipe off the cart handles. Try not to touch your face, wash your hands before and after, etc. Wear a mask if possible. You guys know the drill by now. But it's a good thing to remember in general, especially during flu and cold season. So just something to think about. Next up, you have your groceries now. You've shopped for them, you've prepared, you're bringing them home. So how do you store that food? While working in the restaurant industry, I loved organizing the pantry there. And I would spend so much time in the walk-in fridge and freezer and pantries, just like making everything look clean and beautiful, because it's just easier to cook that way and work that way and order foods when things are organized. So one technique or method that's used in like pretty universally at all restaurants is the FIFO or FIFO method, the first in, first out. So the first in, first out method is a food rotation method, and you want to put all your oldest food that you've purchased before into the front, and any new food behind that. So you should be using the oldest food item first before any of your new items. And then it's easiest to keep like foods together if you have like different things and or the same thing in several different locations around your house or in different pantries. It can be confusing, and then you can overbuy what you actually need. So it will save you time and money if you keep that together, keep it organized, know what you have beforehand. And then as you're doing that, as you're organizing, make sure to check expiration dates and put anything expiring soonest at the front so they're most accessible. And then also include them in your meal plan too if they do have a soon expiration date. Also a note on expiration dates is that they're just a guideline. If your can of food expired yesterday, it's not all of a sudden unedible or going to poison you. It's just a rough guideline. And then like even depending on who packaged it, you're gonna see really pretty different dates around when things are best by or when they're actually expired. So just use your best judgment, smell things, taste a little bit of something before, use your sight to see if there's like any mold or anything sketchy on it. If there's not, it's most likely fine. I think we throw away way more than we actually have to, and it's good to stay on top of that. Don't feel like my mother-in-law and have canned stuff from like 10 years ago that expired 10 years ago. So yeah, if you organize your pantry regularly, that's never going to be a problem. And then a good storage technique is a lot of grains, like flours and different cooking grains that you might use, and beans and legumes. They come in like bags, like either paper or plastic, depending on what you get. And that stuff isn't generally airtight, so it can spoil a lot faster depending on how quick you use stuff. It's a good idea to transfer them to airtight containers. I like to use ball jars because I can as well, so I generally have some of these around. The seal is decent, and it just, I think it looks more attractive too. It's a little bit easier to store than just a bunch of miscellaneous bags that are all different shapes and sizes. It just fits in my pantry a little bit better. So, produce, food storage. So you never want to leave your produce uncovered when it's in your fridge. Uncovered produce is just going to get soggy and it's going to decompose much faster. And it's just going to be sad. Just overnight, it will be limp and unappetizing. So you want to use your crisper drawer. You want to cover things with bags or in Tupperware containers or whatever works for you. Know what produce is best refrigerated versus not refrigerated. Tomatoes and most fruits, just their flavor is just not going to be there when it's refrigerated, especially if you go to all the effort of getting a locally grown tomato or growing your own tomato. Do not put it in the fridge. It's going to get more mealy and sad and just not have its like incredible flavor profile that it originally did. And that goes for saying with most fruit, like apples, stone fruits, like peaches, pears, etc. Just keep those in the counter on the bowl, and it's beautiful and it's easier to grab and you remember it's there. So this is really specific, but if you don't use celery up as quick, it's like I don't, it helps to just wrap the celery in some foil. It will last like 2, 3, 4 times longer than it would just in the bag that it generally comes in. I have not looked up the chemical reaction of why that is, but it works super well. If you don't want to be as wasteful, you can just wipe out your foil and sanitize it a bit and wrap your new celery in it afterwards. And then wrap leafy greens in damp paper towels or thin tea towels, and then you place them in a container. You don't want your leafy greens to be wet, but you want to create a really cool and humid environment for them, and that's going to keep them the most crisp for the longest. If you treat them like that, they should last a week and sometimes up to 2 weeks depending on its hardiness. Kale will last much longer. If you want to revive leafy greens that have become really limp, put them in a bowl of really cold water for an hour or so, even 15-20 minutes, and they will mostly spring back to life unless they're getting kind of in that mushy, very decomposed stage. Don't wash your produce until you're ready to cook with it. Some people like washing their produce beforehand. If you don't dry it off properly, then it could prematurely mold and start decomposing. I think an exception to this might be like apples. If you're getting them from the store and you keep them on your counter, and your family just generally picks one up and eats it as needed, I think that should be fine. Just make sure that it's properly dried off before putting it back. I feel like radishes and beets and also carrots in some cases last so much longer if you place them in like an inch of water and in a container with a lid and you put that in your fridge. I've had radishes and beets last me over a month that way, and it's especially helpful in the springtime. I love radishes because they just grow so easily, but then I'll have too many at once, so it helps me store them longer before going bad and going to waste. All right, next up we have herbs, storing herbs. So Herbs are a tough spot for me. I tend to waste herbs more than anything else in my fridge. But there's a few things that you can do to avoid that and get around it. Mostly you want to treat herbs like fresh flowers, meaning you want to put them in a jar with some water. Some great herbs for this are like parsley, cilantro, mint, basil, and green onions too. So I generally just take a jar, I fill it a couple inches with water, make sure all their roots are in there. I take the rubber band that they come with off of them, and I loosen them up and put them in here and cover them with a bag and maybe a rubber band to secure around the side, and I place them in the refrigerator. Green onions can just be at room temperature. I like to put them in a sunny window and they grow. You just want to cover their bottom little roots, and they will nearly double in size in some cases. They can last like that for about a month, and herbs in the fridge stored, like I mentioned, can last 2 to 3 weeks. If you still haven't used up all your herbs after those 2 weeks or so, and some of them are starting to get a little spotty, you can pick them all, chop them up, and then put them in ice cube trays with some olive oil on top. Freeze those, and then store them in a container later. And whenever you're cooking and you just want an extra like flavor bomb, you just put them into your dish, put a few in there, and you're avoiding wasting, and it tastes delicious. You can also do this with the more woody herbs like thyme and rosemary, which like to be stored a little bit differently. You kind of want to store them like your leafy greens, where you take damp paper towels or a thin cloth and put them in a covered like Tupperware container and put them in the refrigerator. This is also great for fragile herbs like chives and dill specifically. But if you garden and you have herbs out front of your door, you don't need to worry about this. Just go and harvest your herbs as you need them. But this is good to think about for winter time when you might not have access to herbs as much. So a note on food safety. I noticed that a lot of people don't store foods in their fridge that could potentially cause like foodborne illnesses or spread foodborne pathogens. So just a note on that and how you should store food in your fridge. So anything that is eaten raw or ready to eat, that will be snacked on, a lot of different yogurts and cheeses and dairy, any leftovers should be stored on the top shelf of your fridge. And then generally you're going to keep all of your fruits and vegetables in the crisper drawer. It drives me bonkers that most fridge design have crisper drawers on the bottom, below the last shelf of the fridge, which I don't like, but generally they're like a full plane, so if anything is to drip, they don't usually go within those drawers. Raw meat you want to store on your lowest shelf. I always put any raw meat that I have or that's thawing in my fridge on a pan or a plate or a bowl, anything that will prevent it from leaking underneath if it has some sort of hole in it. And really you should be storing your proteins in a certain order as well. You want your poultry on the bottom, followed by pork, beef, and shellfish. Any cooked proteins can go into that ready to eat area, but any raw proteins really need to be separate so that if there was any potential leaks on anything, it's not going to go on food or the packaging of food and cause your family to get sick. Dairy should be stored towards the back of the fridge. A lot of people put their dairy in the fridge door. And And that tends to be the warmest spot of the fridge. Really, you want to keep things that are high in sugar, salt, and vinegar, anything that's more preserved like that and is going to be a little bit more shelf stable in the doors of your fridge. And dairy should go towards the back so it doesn't spoil as quick. Additional food safety, especially during COVID-19. I've included this video for you to watch at your leisure. I think it's like one of the most comprehensive videos I've seen on food safety at home. And it's this like PSA grocery shopping tips in COVID-19. And this doctor breaks down how to separate your groceries, how to sanitize them when you get them home, and whatnot to keep your family more safe. So consider looking into that. It might be a little intense for some people, but I think it's better to be safe than sorry, especially if you have any immunocompromised people in your household. So next up is actually prepping the meal that you've planned. I just have, this is a quick section, it's kind of an add-on, but I feel like bulk meal prepping is really valuable. It's going to save you time and stress and cleaning, which I personally hate doing. So yeah, if you spend the time to, like, on the beginner side, you can just start with chopping vegetables that you're going to be adding to your meal throughout that week. I especially like doing this with onions because onions are my least favorite thing to chop. Just without fail, they always make my eyes well up, and they're just, I don't know, not pleasant. But I use them in absolutely everything, so they're the most handy thing for me to have available in my fridge. Intermediate, you can pre-cook different elements of your meal, like meat and vegetables, so that you can make cooking easier overall. Related to this, one of the best concepts I feel like I learned while in the food industry was the idea of mise en place, which is everything in its place. So before you cook a meal, you have everything you're going to need in that meal already chopped. You have things ideally even measured out. All your ingredients are within a convenient, like, grabbable area, and then you can just go and execute when you're ready. And part of that is chopping and pre-cooking your elements. I really like to do a pork shoulder roast about once a month, and I put that in a crock pot, and it's just me and my husband here, so it's a lot of meat to eat for two people, but I like to freeze part of it, and then I will divvy part of that pre-cooked roast into different meals, like carnitas tacos or a burrito bowl or something of that sort. So it's really easy to segment out and makes your meal actual prep when you're ready to put together a meal so much faster. And then if you really want to go all out, doing like meal prep one day a week can really save you a lot of time. Like, you only have to clean up the kitchen once. You don't have to worry about what you're going to eat all week. It's all right in the fridge, just ready to warm up. And then it's less stress, just thinking about what you're going to do, trying to make the time throughout the work week when you're a little bit lower energy to like what you're going to eat that day. I do this most of the year. We cook 2 to 3 meals, sometimes 4 if we're feeling crazy, on most Sundays, and then we'll freeze a portion of that. Like I said, you can, on the 3rd week, I barely have to cook. I use most of those frozen leftovers, and yeah, I clean up my kitchen once, and then I just load the dishwasher throughout the rest of the week, and I don't really have to worry about as much. Some notes on food preservation. If you want to start, you can start by freezing your fresh vegetables you got. I feel like that is helpful right now. I feel like I've seen the frozen sections of grocery stores a little bit more bare than usual, but there's been plenty of fresh produce. So if that's the case for you too, you can chop those vegetables. You can do them raw or roasted or pre-cooked in some way, and then just spread them on like a pan or a cookie sheet and put them in your freezer. Once they're frozen, you can then transfer them to a different container, and that will really help prevent freezer burn vegetables down the line, and help preserve them better. But overall, you'd want to try to use them up within a month of when you freeze them, just to make sure that they're still tasting fresh. So intermediate is fermenting vegetables. Fermenting vegetables is really healthy for you. It's great to have those probiotics involved with it. It's pretty fun to do and to watch the whole experience happen. And then it just adds so much more flavor and complexity to your meals. It adds that kind of extra umami or funk element, and extra brightness to things. And so many things can be fermented. So if you're interested in that, we have a couple workshops, usually through the Growing Gardeners Workshop series throughout the year, that's on fermenting foods. We do stuff on vinegars and also stuff like sauerkraut and other fermented vegetables. And that's usually towards the end of summer into fall. So keep a lookout for that. Also, advanced, you can learn how to can and preserve your fruits and vegetables. If you have too many at once, especially if you're a gardener, you probably know this pain. But you can turn them into jams and jellies, pickles, vinegars, and if you learn how to pressure can specifically, you can make them into ready-to-eat soups and stews. So can store even longer, won't take up as much freezer space, which is precious to some people like me. And then you have just ready-to-eat food, really easy to grab, especially during the winter. So consider learning that. We also have a class for that, usually at least once, generally twice a year. We were going to have one coming up soon, but because most classes are virtual at this moment, we had to push that off because it's such a hands-on class. So look for that later this year. Hope you can join if you're interested in that, because it's a really fun class. All right, that brings us to the resources section finally. So I've included some resources, like meal inspiration websites, Food Gawker that I mentioned, Pinterest. Supercook is a new one for me. It's a site that you can enter in what ingredient or ingredients you want to create a meal around, and it will suggest a bunch of different recipes to use for that. So check that out, might be super helpful. Printouts, we got the free printable meal planners and calendars that I mentioned. Really beautiful, lots of different options on how to use that. So if you're someone that likes physically writing things down, keeping it in a binder, that might be a good option for you. And then support our local food providers like Lone Tree Foods that I mentioned before. There's a list of farmers markets, which isn't comprehensive. There's a few neighborhood markets like the Gifford Park neighborhood market to check out. So make sure you know about those and support our local farmers. Farm Table Delivery, they are similar to Lone Tree Foods. They bring together a bunch of farming producers and have an online ordering system that you can go through. And then think about doing those CSAs, Community Supported Agriculture. There's lots of different farms around Omaha that offer CSAs to people. Benton Bounty is one, Big Muddy Urban Farm, which I mentioned I tried before. No More Empty Pots has one, as well as pre-made meal options. They also work for anyone that is food insecure, will give you very discounted prices on things. And then Mullen Hills Farms with Kate Coffee. She does an herbal CSA if you're really interested in medicinal herbs and learning more about that. Blendinghoff Farms also does a CSA. So that brings us to the end. So how was this workshop for you? Help us out and give us your feedback on that link and links associated with where this video is posted. It really helps us know what you got out of it, whether we should tweak anything. This was my first workshop that I've taught with City Sprouts, so give me any feedback on there on how I can improve, and if you would like to know more about any aspects of these things that I've talked about, or teach another class that's a little bit more in depth on certain subjects, let us know. And thank you. Thanks from City Sprouts. Thanks from me. If you have any questions about this, feel free to email me. It's addie@omahasprouts.org. And then check out our other workshops that we have going on growinggardeners.org. And we have lots of great workshops coming up. Most of them are virtual through June at the moment. We will see if we are going to start offering physical workshops again sometime this summer. Kind of living week to week lately on our decisions around that. So, and then if you want just to get a notification every time I get new workshops posted, just scroll down to the bottom of that page, and you can subscribe to the newsletter there. You just have to enter your email, and that's it. So, thank you. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope everyone is staying safe and healthy right now.